Yo, what's going on, guys and gals? Dat here with another NFL DraftKings early Sunday slate picks video for Week 7. Week 6 was really good for me. Just over 40 people took a look at my recommendations, and many of you followed me on Twitter because of this. For that, I thank you. My hope is to continue that success and help you all get introduced to some dead presidents, but remember, it's all in good fun. Just a few reminders before we begin. On my Week 6 recap video, I pledged that if this video gets 25 likes, I would share one of my lineups on Twitter, so let's make that happen. And also remember, I only take a look at the early Sunday slate games, therefore we won't be looking at the Chiefs versus the Raiders and the Eagles versus the Redskins. With that being said, let's take a look at my top picks. Alright, so for quarterbacks this week, my top picks with the most upside are Dak Prescott, Cam Newton, and Marcus Mariota. Dak is going up against the 49ers' weak secondary, which ranks 27th in the league against the pass, averaging 262 yards allowed per game. I expect him to drop some bombs on the Niners this game, targeting Dez Bryant and Cole Beasley pretty heavily. Cam Newton has been doing really well the past few weeks, getting it done in the air and on the ground. The Bears have a pretty solid defense, so I expect Cam to be scrambling out of the pocket and taking off or checking down to Christian McCaffrey a bunch. Seems like a good option this week if you can pay up for him. Mariota is facing the Cleveland Browns. I almost feel bad picking on the Browns every single week, but at the same time, I like getting money, and these guys are always giving up points everywhere on the field, so you got to take advantage of that. Much like Cam, I expect Mariota to be getting it done on the ground as well as in the air. He looked decent in the game against the Colts on Monday Night Football. You could tell he still wasn't 100%, but after this week, he should be prime and ready to let loose on Cleveland, so keep an eye on Mariota. Next up are my lower-priced quarterback options. Russell Wilson just seems too cheap at $6,400 not to take advantage of it, especially when they're going up against the Giants, who are just completely decimated right now. Expecting pretty good things to come out of that game for Russell. Jared Goff is also in play. He's going up against the Cardinals, whose pass defense gave up almost 300 yards to Ryan Fitzpatrick after Winston left with an injury in the second quarter of the Buccaneers' last game. If they're giving up almost 300 yards to a backup quarterback in a little over a half a game of football, then I expect Goff to get over that hump, break 300 passing yards, and get a few touchdowns while he's at it. So, also Josh McCown is in there. He was excellent for me last week, putting up 25 points. He should have had more, but that Austin Seferian-Jenkins touchdown was overturned. I'm sorry, but if you're paying up for a higher tight end this week, and it happens to be Austin Seferian-Jenkins, how could you not play McCown? If ASJ has a good game, then McCown will have a good game. It's just that simple. So I would recommend taking a second look at McCown if you are in need for a lower-owned quarterback this week. Okay, now these are the extremely risky GPP tournament-only quarterbacks. Again, do not put these guys in your cash lineups. You will just have a bad time, and I don't need y'all blowing up on my Twitter or comment section how I told you to play these guys in cash. Don't do it. Anyway, with that being said, Tyrod Taylor is going up against the Buccaneers, who have allowed 301 yards on average in the air and ranks nearly dead last in this category. Not to mention, Taylor is another guy who looks to get out of the pocket and run, so he'll earn points that way too. At $5,100, he just seems too good to pass up in this matchup. These other two guys, CJ Beathard and Brett Hundley, if you paid up at every other position and you need a cheap quarterback that could potentially have a ceiling in their matchups, these two guys are probably what you're looking for. Beathard took over for Brian Hoyer in the last 49ers game. He put up some good numbers, had a pretty good showing, and he was named the starter for this week. So as long as his performance keeps up, I expect some pretty good things out of him, especially against the Cowboys, whose secondary is averaging 220 passing yards per game allowed. Now, Hundley will be filling in for an injured Aaron Rodgers, who is out for the season with a broken collarbone. Now, Hundley is also more of a running quarterback, but the potential is there as well to pass against the Saints defense, which has been known to let opposing quarterbacks let loose in the air. So again, these are risky plays, but they could pay off in a GPP format, so you never know. If you like to live dangerously, you can give these guys a shot. My top running backs for this week are Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, and LaShawn McCoy. Now, apparently the judge who is handling Elliott's case in the Southern District of New York is on vacation, so Elliott was granted a restraining order which will allow him to play for the next 2 games, which is great news for us DFS players because this matchup with the 49ers is pretty juicy. Both the passing and the running attack by the Cowboys are primed to just steamroll all over the 49ers. Now, Elliott is pricing at $9,000. Le'Veon Bell is $9,100, so if you're heavy on him, I would give Elliott a few spots in some of your lineups. Most likely you won't be disappointed. Now, Fournette is still on the injury list with that ankle sprain, but he's most likely going to play. They already came out and said that he could have gone back into the last game, but they opted to let him rest and let Chris Ivory take the snaps for the rest of the game. So he should be good to go on that front. The Jaguars are facing a pretty squishy Colts defense, who got torn to shreds by DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry on Monday. So this should be a no-brainer. I would definitely have Fournette pretty exposed in your lineups for this week. I also like Shady at 7,400. He really hasn't had a big game yet. He hasn't scored any touchdowns, and I think he's about due to have that big week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in Week 7. He is heavily involved in the passing game, getting targeted on average 6 times per game, averaging 48 yards in the air and 65 on the ground at home. Once he gets in the end zone, the point floodgates will open and we will all enjoy the spoils. So as long as they're able to move the ball into the red zone, I expect Shady to put up some pretty good points this week. Okay, my mid-tier priced running back picks are Mark Ingram, Christian McCaffrey, and Jerick McKinnon. With Adrian Peterson getting traded to the Cardinals, Ingram had a monster game against the Lions last week as his touches were no longer getting divided between himself, Peterson, and Kamara. And what a difference it made. He couldn't be stopped by the Lions, and now they're facing a Packers defense which is giving up an average of 120 yards per game on the ground. Plus, Ingram is heavily involved in the passing game too, so he has a lot of upside. I really like Ingram this week. I also like Jerick McKinnon for the same reasons as Ingram. He gets it done in the air as well as on the ground. He's getting targeted pretty heavily as Case Keenum constantly checks down pretty frequently. The only downside to McKinnon is that he does have a tendency to fumble, as he has done so 3 times in his last 3 games. So hopefully he tightens up the screws, hangs on to the rock, because if he keeps performing this way, he should expect another big game against the Baltimore Ravens, whose defense is allowing about 141 rushing yards per game. Now, McCaffrey is not a guy who's going to get it done for you on the ground. He's not that kind of halfback. He's more of a receiver. And in a PPR format, this is what you want. I expect the Panthers to use McCaffrey in many different ways in the passing game, which should lead to points for us players. So if you don't have McCaffrey in a few of your lineups, I would definitely recommend him as well. All right, and I just want to touch on these 3 guys as well before I get into wide receivers. Jay Ajayi, I got to admit, he has burned me in the past, and he had one good showing last week against the Falcons, so it's possible he rides on that momentum against the Jets this week, who is allowing 138 yards per game against the run. So I will have a little exposure to Ajayi this week, but I'm not completely excited by it. Like I said, he has burned me in the past, and I don't think I'm completely over it yet. Carlos Hyde is literally fighting for his position as the starting running back against Breida. He had a great game against a tough Redskins defense last week, and now he's going to be facing the Cowboys run defense, which has allowed 118 rushing yards per game. So I expect Hyde to continue to perform in order to stay top dog in San Francisco. So that should be a pretty good play this week too. Last but not least, Adrian Peterson, AP, what a comeback performance after being traded to the Cardinals. Arizona's run scheme is a better designed scheme for Adrian Peterson than it was back in New Orleans. I expect AP to continue to show he's still got it and will put up big numbers against the Rams, who are ranked third worst in the league against the run. If you need a low-priced but hard-working running back, this is your guy at $5,800. Okay, wide receivers. To be honest, the wide receiver slate this week is what the word meh was designed for. There's nothing really that great at either end of the spectrum, but we have to work with it. AJ Green is going up against Pittsburgh, which should be interesting. Sure, he'll have Joe Hayden on him the whole game, and Joe Hayden hasn't given up many opportunities to number one receivers all season, but it's AJ Green, and he's had some pretty amazing games against the Steelers in the past, plus he'll be competing against Antonio Brown, which should give him a boost in drive to outperform him, so I'll have AJ Green in a few lineups. Dez Bryant will be looking to hook up with Dak Prescott a lot in this game against the 49ers. I know I've already talked about it a lot, but the matchup this week is just too good. You can't pass it up. I would try to have as much of the Cowboys offense in your lineups as you can. So I will have quite a bit of exposure to Dez Bryant this week. Now, Jarvis Landry is a bit of a situational choice. If Devontae Parker is out this week with an injury, I expect Landry to be targeted a ton. So keep a watchful eye on the injury reports as they come in, as it could come down to a game time decision. If Devontae Parker is going to play, I'm most certainly going to fade Jarvis Landry in my lineups. He's pretty in there right now. I have him in almost every lineup, but if Devontae Parker is good to go, I might fade him. So just keep an eye out on that. All right, for the mid-tier wide receivers this week, Jordy Nelson is $6,800. Let me repeat that. $6,800. That is insane. His stock went way down when Rodgers got hurt. That price could be compared to robbery. I would be crazy to pass this deal up against the Saints, so Jordy will be in a few of my lineups this week. Pierre Garçon is somebody I really, really like this week. I think I'm going to have the most exposure to him this week. Regardless of who is at quarterback for the 49ers, Beathard or Hoyer, they are most likely going to be playing from behind, which means they will be throwing a lot. And I expect Garçon to be the beneficiary of those targets more so than the other options available. So I really like Pierre Garçon this week. Now, like Jarvis Landry, Demaryius Thomas is another situational option. If Emmanuel Sanders is out, then he should be targeted a lot. And he would be a great play. He's also nursing an injury, so you'll want to just make sure he is available before you do anything. But I think the value is great on Thomas this week. Like I said, just keep an eye on Emmanuel Sanders. If he's out, then I'm going to be pretty heavy on Demaryius Thomas. Okay, now these wide receivers are GPP tournament plays only. Do not play them in cash. These are guys that are under $5,000 salary, so if you need a good, low-priced option, this would be what you're looking for. Now, Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods would be great choices this week against the Cardinals. Peterson is going to be shadowing Sammy Watkins most likely, which should open up opportunities for Kupp in the slot. Now, I know that some of you are looking at Eric Decker and thinking, why not Rashard Matthews? Rashard is a great option too, but if you're spending up at other positions and you're looking for some flex appeal, I think Decker has been matching targets with Matthews, and he has much less of a salary hit. So I think you should consider Decker in that regard. The last one here is Marquise Lee from the Jaguars, which should be a pretty sneaky GPP play as well. The Colts do not have a great defense overall. He was limited against the Steelers with Fournette pounding away, but last week he was targeted 10 times against the Rams and overall has taken most advantage of Allen Robinson's absence in the past few games. He's been outperforming Allen Hurns, so I think Marquise Lee is worth a spot on a few lineups if I need a low-owned, cheap option in GPP tournament only. Okay, so tight ends are pretty straightforward this week. You have Delaney Walker against the Browns, ASJ against the Dolphins, and Jimmy Graham against the Giants. Walker has the most upside at 5,800 as the Browns have given up the most points to tight ends this season. So if you have salary cap to spare, by all means go for Walker. ASJ had a great showing last week against the Patriots, and I expect him to be heavily targeted this week against the Dolphins. Hopefully he doesn't get screwed out of any more touchdowns this week. I know I keep bringing that up, but I'm still salty as fuck over that call. And Jimmy Graham against the Giants, I feel is a pretty good play. 3 out of 5 games have yielded at least double-digit fantasy points for Graham. The Giants are ranked 22nd against tight end in DVOA this season. He's a very solid option and is pretty underpriced this week considering his ceiling. If you're going to stack Russell with someone, I would recommend Graham over Baldwin, but that's just me. But I do like Jimmy Graham this week too. All right, my lower tier tight ends this week, I'm going with Evan Graham, Hunter Henry, and Tyler Kroft. Not much to say about Evan Engram. The Giants' offense literally has no other options other than Ingram, so I expect him to be pretty heavily targeted by Eli Manning this game. I'm sure they will be playing from behind, and they'll need to air that ball out a lot, so I'm going to have some exposure to Evan Engram. Hunter Henry has just been unleashed the past few weeks. There was a time where nobody was sure if Antonio Gates or Hunter Henry would actually get the looks at tight end for the Chargers, but now it's pretty damn clear that Henry is the guy. Against a tough Broncos defense, most would shy away, but Denver ranks 29th against opposing tight ends, so it's worth a shot with Hunter Henry, especially given his price point at $4,200. Now, Tyler Kroft, I think, will be a sneaky GPP play against the Steelers. They are going to be pretty focused on containing A.J. Green, so it should open up a lot of target opportunities for Kroft. He should be pretty low owned, and if he goes off, I'm expecting a big payday from him. So I will have some exposure to Tyler Kroft this week. Okay, and finally, defense and special teams. After that performance last week against the Lions, a lot of people are going to be taking the Saints defense this week, considering they'll be facing a rookie quarterback in Green Bay's backup, Brett Hundley. But at $3,000, the price is right. I'm going to have a pretty good amount of exposure to the Saints defense this week, as I'm sure a lot of other people will as well. I'm sure a lot of other people are going to be on the Titans versus the Browns, so that's another option. But I do like the Vikings this week against the Ravens. Joe Flacco and the rest of the offense just hasn't looked good at all this season. Their defense is performing pretty well, but at $3,300 against a weak Ravens offense, I have to take the Vikings. So that's it for Week 7. Hope you all got some great insight and options for your lineups you may not have considered before. If you made it to this section of the video, please hit that like button and subscribe for future content, which I'll post every week. Again, you can follow me on Twitter, where I post updates and other news I see throughout the week. Plus, I'm usually tweeting live during the game, so hit me up if you'd like. As always, good luck. Thanks for watching. Cheers.